Now, we will be understanding something related to querying the data. Now, what is a query? As we have understood earlier, that query is nothing but the request for data from the databases. Now, in the previous part, we have installed a database where a classic models database which was pre-created by the MySQL version. It has been loaded into my system. It has lots of tables. But just by having a data into my RDBMS is not going to make sense. I need to access the data. I need to retrieve some or the other information in order to understand what kind of data is stored, or do I need any manipulations or not. Or I also want to generate certain reports. So if I want to do all those tasks, obviously I need to send up a query. Now, initially, as I've said, query is nothing but a request for data from the database. Let's see how does a query works, how do we write a query, and what are certain various ways for writing a query for the same. So, if I want to talk upon the SQL as a language, everyone knows that SQL is a communicating language. Now, this communicating language is not for humans. It's not for us. It's for a communication or a mode of interactivity between a database and a user. So, it's a communicating language, but we can also call it as a programming language for your databases so that I can access the data from the databases. So, it's a communicating language for structured databases. You can also call them as relational databases because structured databases are mostly what? Relational in nature. So, SQL is used to interact with those kind of databases in order to get and gather certain information. Now, as you know that all languages are what? A hybrid language. Now, what is the meaning of a hybrid language? Hybrid language means they are made up of n number of components into it. That is, there will be one way to interact, there will be one another way to interact for the same. So, similarly, SQL is also a hybrid language which has components into it. Now, what kind of components do they have? Let's try to understand the same. So, when I talk upon SQL, SQL as a language is bifurcated into components. So, the components would be, the very first component of SQL is DDL, also known as DDL command. Now, DDL stands for Data Definition Language. Now, what is the meaning of Data Definition Language? Now, Data Definition Language means we are going to define the data. Now, defining means something related to making the data or something related to understanding or creation of the same. So, data definition language is one of the variant of SQL where we will be defining a data as such. Now, with respect to this SQL, there is one more definition, one more instruction which I can give known as DML. Now, DML is known as data manipulation command or also known as data manipulation language. Now, what is the meaning of manipulation? Everyone knows that manipulation is nothing but your changes which will be allowed into the data. It could be adding a data, it could be eliminating a data, it could be updating a data as such. So, there is something called as data manipulation language, also known as DML commands in short form. Now, when I talk upon DCL, DCL is nothing but data control language. Now, what is the meaning of control? Control means to whom the data would be given and to whom the data should not be a part of it. How much the data needs to be given and how much it should be retrieved back. So, in order to maintain the control of the data, SQL language would be modified. So, there is something called as DCL, also known as data control language, which helps me to control the access of the data. So, with respect to this, there is something called as TCL. Now, as we know DCL, the D is the data, C stands for control and L stands for language. Now, what is this TCL? Is it same like the DCL or is there any major difference between both of them? So when I talk upon CL in the TCL, control language remain the same. The word T stands for transaction. Now what is the meaning of transaction? Whatever tasks are happening within the data or whatever manipulations are happening within the data, that is your manipulation commands, are nothing but your task within your data or transactions within your data. When you are handling those transactions, when you are dealing with those transactions, we do something called as transaction control language. We will be understanding them in detail shortly. So let's first understand what is TCL and then proceed further with the rest of them. So when I talk upon TCL, it's a transaction control language. If you are getting confused with what is a transaction, whatever manipulation commands are happening within your data, they are nothing but your transactions. So there is something called as TCL, known as transaction control language. And the next one comes as DQL, nothing but a data query language. So there is something called as DQL, known as data query language. So if I want to talk upon all the components or the parts of SQL, SQL is a combined version of all those elements or all those language. Now that's why I said that SQL is a hybrid language. It's not only just querying the data, but it has lots of other operations. You can see operations related to data definition, data manipulation, data control, transaction control, as well as related to data query. Now, these operations are also known as command. Soon, we will be understanding what are commands of SQL and so on. But as I have a data pre-created with me, let's try to understand the querying purpose. That is, how will I access my data? How will I get the hold of the data or the outcomes or the result sets of my data? So let's try to understand the component of DQL and then understand rest of the other languages in detail and why they are known as commands. So when I talk upon DQL, it stands for data query language. So it's data query language. Now what is the meaning of data query language? Now you know data is your data set which is being stored. So data is your database. Now I have installed a classic model database into my Workbench and I need to work on that particular data. Just by loading the data into my databases or into my DBMS or RDBMS is not going to make sense. What I'm going to do is, whatever data is being kept, I want to access the data, I want to gather the information and I want to do certain report generations for the same. So for that, obviously, I need to write certain queries. Now, as I have said, what is a query? Query is nothing but a request for data. From where? From database. That is, if I want to gather some outcome from the data which is stored in the database, obviously I will write something called as query. Now, as you know that MySQL as a Workbench is a client-server architecture. What is the meaning of client? There will be one request shared, and based on that request, whatever the answer would be generated, there will be a response given to us, whether the result set would be given or whether the error would be given. So here, what I am going to do is, I am going to send certain requests of data in the form of queries. So let's try to understand what kind of queries do we write and how does a query needs to be written into my SQL, into the pre-created data which we have. That is the classic model database. Now, if you see the database over here, you can see classic models database. There are n number of tables available. There is a customer table, there is employees table, there is officers table, there is order details, orders, payments, product lines, products, and so on. Now, this is a data where information is there. How can I get that there is some information or say there is something which is stored? I can click. There are columns, indexes, and many more things. If I click on column, you can see lots of columns are being created. It's not an empty data as such, or it's not an empty table as such. Your table needs to have at least one column. That is a minimum criteria which comes when a table is being created. Now it's a pre-created table, so let's try to first work upon those queries, work upon those databases. Later on, we can create a table from scratch and perform the same analysis which we understood with respect to the query language as such. So if you see, there is a data. Here it's known as schema because it is showing a schematic representation for the same. But what if I want to see what is being actually stored within that table? How will I get to know that? So here what I will do is, in the customers, when I click on that particular table name, you can see 3 options available. There is one option related to info, settings, and there is another option which has a table icon and a flash symbol. Now you all know what is the meaning of flash symbol. Flash symbol is used to run. So what kind of execution is going to happen? When I click on the same, you can see a tab being generated known as customer, and you can see a query is being written. Did I write any query as such? But no. You can see a code has been written and an outcome is shown on the basis of those queries with respect to what data is being stored within that table. So this was a customers table. Now it's not related that I'll only see for customers table. For all the tables which I have created, which I have into my database, my result set would be generated. Now I didn't write any query as such. Let me close it. Let's say I want to see order details. If I click on the same, you can see it's just shown. But these are certain queries in order to see what data or what information is being stored within the tables. But how I can get more specific information for the same? I cannot do only this every time. I have to generate more specific information. I have to create more reports with respect to certain requirements as such. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take use of those queries with the help of something called as clauses. Now what are clauses? Clauses in SQL will help me to gather the data according to the requirements. That is, it will help me to access the data with a certain specification, with certain requirements or certain key related information as such. So we are going to understand clauses in our query. So as shown that there is a customer table, orders details table. Now there was some query written, but let's try things from scratch and let's not do it from here. How I will be able to do it? Now I don't have any experience into writing SQL queries, but no need to worry. It's very simple. It's very informative and it's very user friendly as such. You will be able to understand what query I am writing. You will be able to understand what is the outcome being generated and how the outcome is being generated. Before performing on an actual database, let's try to see on a dummy table which I have created at my end. So if you go over here, I have a dummy table over here. Consider that this is one of the table of my database. Named as what? Named as employees. Let me name this table as employees. And I want to write a query over here, which will help me to access some or the other information from this particular table. Now, what kind of queries I need to write or what kind of request I need to write? I will take help of clauses in terms of writing queries or in terms of writing request. As I've said, clauses will make my query more informative, more specific. So when I talk upon clauses helps to extract data according to the requirements and criteria, so that it helps in report generation. So here you can see I am going to do something called as clauses. Now clauses is what? It's some requirement or criteria specific outcome which I will be able to gather when I need to generate certain report or generate certain analysis. Now that is the meaning of what a clauses is. Now what kind of analysis do I require over here? Let's try to create some questions and let's try to see how will a clause help me to generate an outcome. Now let's say I write a question. Over here that is related to the first question which I need to gather from the data. The first result I need to gather from the data is show all details. Show all details from employees table. Now what is the question which arises over here? That show me all the details related to which table? Related to the employees table which is kept over here. Now what kind of details do they require? Do they require details related to clauses? Do they require details related to particular employee? Do they require details related to particular age? No. They have mentioned all. Now what is the meaning of all? All means all the rows and all the columns. Now make sure that we are working on an MySQL Workbench. Now whatever data is stored in my MySQL Workbench or particularly in all the types of RDBMS, it is going to be in the form of tables. Now when the table is there, each row is known as a record. Each row of the table is known as record and each column of the table is known as what? An attribute. Also known as feature. Many people call it as feature. So, employee ID is one of the feature of your employees table. Name is one of the feature or one of the attribute in terms of sharing and information of employees. Same goes with age, gender. So, columns are known as attributes or features, whereas rows are known as records, which are there. So, here all the data or all the tables are in this format only. That is, they will be having attributes and they will be having records. So, as per the question, show all details from employees table, which means I want everything. Now, I want what? Everything to be shared from this employees table. So, I want to show the entire table over here. How will I do it? So, let's say, let me write a basic syntax. Now, what is the syntax? Syntax is nothing but a writing pattern. Now, what is the writing pattern? The way you write your query. The way the query is written. That's a writing pattern. So, in the syntax, let's say I write select. The syntax of selecting the data starts with select. Now, select what? I will write column names. Column names. It could be one column, it could be two column, it could be three column. Or specifically if I say that instead of this, I'll write column 1, column 2 and so on till n number of columns. Now, you will select these columns, that is for sure. But do you think so that from where the column would be selected? Just you write select employee ID, name, age, gender and you end the query. Does MySQL knows that from where the columns are being selected? No. So, here you need to write something called as from. Now, what is the purpose of from? From will help me to go towards the location from where the data is being gathered. So, from means it will help and get the table name over here. That's the table name. And this is an query which executes, this is done. So, I will try to terminate it as such over here. So, this is a simplistic syntax of writing a simple approach or extracting a very basic data from your SQL. And your queries with clauses are going to start with select. Remember that. So when I talk upon select, it will always have column names. When I talk upon from, it will always have a table name. So if I want to talk upon the syntactical representation, so let's say, so select as one of the part of clauses in terms of extraction selects the list of columns to be shown in outcome. Which means whatever columns do you want to show in outcome, always the column names or whatever is the column element which you want to showcase in the outcome will come in select. Now there is something related to, let's say, from. Now what is the purpose of from over here? Now from will always help me to mention that from which, from where the data is selected for outcome. Means particularly it will always have a table name or a table name. So from where the outcome is being selected, from where you are selecting the outcome, that will be understood over here. So I have something called as select, which will help me to select the number of columns which I want to show in the outcome or what I want to show in the outcome. And from will help me to decide from where I am going to gather this column set or gather this information to be shown in the outcome. So these are the two things which I will write, and your select is incomplete without the from statement. So what happens over here? Let me clear it and let me write the query for the same. So what kind of query I can see? So there is something called as select. Now select what? Select employee ID, name, age, gender. Let's say they want all the details from employees. Now I don't want to sit and write all the column names. If I want all the columns, I'll write employee ID, then there is name, then there is age, then there is gender, then there is department, then there is location, then there is what? A salary. Don't you think so? My select list has become too big. And I'll write from. From what is the table name which I have? That's employees. Now my select list looks too big. I've selected all the columns because what is the query? That select all details from the employees table. So if I write this entire table will be shown to me as a result set. So this was an outcome, but what if I don't want to write all the column names? I know that all the columns needs to be shown, but I don't want to write all column names. So instead of writing all the column names one by one separated by comma, what I could possibly do is I can write this query in a more simplified manner known as select. And if you want all the columns to be selected, you can simply put up a star. Star means all. Star means everything. So select star from. From means from where are you gathering this information? From the employees table. So from employees, this information is being gathered. So the outcome of this query and the outcome of this query is going to remain the same. Why star is written? Because if I want all the columns to be accessed from my table, instead of writing one column name, I can mention star. So this was first query solution for the same. I hope you understood. Now let's say I write the second query. Let's say I write it over here. Now what's the second query? The second query is find the name, age, gender and department of employees. This is what I want to find. This is what I wanted to find. So how can I do it? Is I can start it with what? Select. Now in select, no need to write star. Why star is not supposed to be written? Because it is asking not all columns over here. It is asking only certain specific columns. So when specific columns are being asked, you will mention the column names. Let's say first column name is name. What is the column name which is given as age? What is the column name given as gender? What is another column which is there as department? Make sure the column names are matching to the names which are available into your table. So department which is there, and then I write something called as from where I want to do it, from the employees which are there, and I put up a semicolon. So what it is going to do is, it is going to extract name, age, gender and department. It is not going to show me the employee ID, location and salary into the outcome. So this was just with respect to certain pen and paper analysis, that how a query would be written, how a simplistic approach of gathering or extracting the data would be given. Now let's try to see the same kind of operations into my workbench, so that we'll get hold on that how we will be able to write in the query approach of SQL and how the outcomes would be generated for the same. So let's try to write certain queries with my SQL over here. So as you can see that I have opened a new file, I have opened a new query file. What I'm going to do is going to write certain SQL statements over here. So first, let me comment and write what I'm going to do so that this code file is informative for me. So what I'm going to do is, I'm understanding DQL, which is data query language. Now what is data query language? Which will help me to query the data, that is access the data or do certain statements with the data in terms of report generation as such. Now when I'm doing data query language, I'm writing queries, I'm accessing the data with the help of something called as clauses. Now what are clauses? It makes my query informative, it makes my query specific, it helps me to gather data according to certain specification. So the clauses helps to gather data with specifications or however I require. So I'm writing in short for you before we have understood the definition for the clauses. So the first clause which we understood over here, I can write a single line comment anyhow. The first clause which we understood is select, but let me not write this into a single line, let me write it into multi-line. So the first clause which we understood was select. Now what is the purpose of select? Select helps to select the columns or result sets to be shown in the outcome. So it will help me to do that. Now it's a multi-line comment, so there will be no problem over here. So I have something called as from. So what is the purpose of from? From helps me to extract outcome from a specific table or set of tables which you want. So if I want to write the syntax, that is a very basic syntax. Basic syntax in the sense, the basic way of writing the queries. basic syntax, it will always start with select. Now there is no such requirement that your syntax should always be uppercase, it should be lowercase, or it should be written in 10 lines or 1 line. You can write it anyhow. SQL is not having that kind of restriction. That is, you have to write it in specific cases or you have to write in different lines. You can write everything in 1 line or you can also write all the things in different lines. So I write select, I can write column 1, column 2, and let's say till column number n. From where I'm going to gather it? From a specific table name. So there is a specific table name which is given. So this is the simplistic query in terms of accessing the data from a particular table. So there are no such extra requirements, extra filtration, extra criteria needs to be there. This is a simplistic approach of getting the access of the data. So I have ended a multi-line clause over here, a multi-line comment over here. So let me first understand with respect to the first question. So I'll write show all the customers' details. Now this is the first question which I have. Show all the customer details. Now first let me see if customers table is available into the database in which I am working on or not. So if I go, how will I get to know that which database is being worked upon, which database name is in bold format? So here you can see classic models is in bold format, which means that database is being selected. Now if I want the customer's information to be there, is there a customer table? The answer is yes. So let's see how will I write a query. Now many people, what they do, they will write queries like this. So people think that everything needs to be written in uppercase, but there is no such restriction. You can write in any case. So I'll write select star, but syntax has column names, right? How will I get to know which column names are there? I can go over here. I can put up my cursor and I can write customer name, say customer number. I'm just double clicking and I'm getting those informations over here. So I write customer number, let's say customer name, contact last name, contact first name. It's there, but it's a too much effort. Now so I'm just selecting and these things are being added. What if I have to manually write? It will take an n number of efforts from me. So what I will do is, instead of writing all the column names, I know that all columns needs to be there in the outcome. So what I'll put up over here is star. So when you put star after select, which means all the columns from the specified tables are being selected. So I'll write from, you can see the case alignment doesn't matter. From. Now from which table do you think so it will be there? If I just write select star and run the query, what it is there, you can see in the action output that no tables used. Unless and until you tell that which table needs to be used in order to generate this outcome, the query is not going to show any result. So that's why from is a very integral part with select. So comes from where you are going to do it? From the table name. Now you have to match the table name which is there into your database. In my database, it's customer. It could be customer info. You just have to see what is the name of the database for the particular query. Here, what I can do is I can keep my cursor anywhere and I can run this or select and run this. But I will choose a shortcut key which is Control and Enter. So I do Control Enter. You can see all the columns which are possibly available into my customer tables are being shown with all the result sets. So as per show all the customer details, I am able to gather and write the query for the same. So this was the first one. Now let's try to gather some more information over here. And let's try to write certain another SQL part. Now let's say there are different tables. Let me close this out. And let's say products. Let's see what are the unique product names. So show all the product names. Now show all the product names available. That's what I want. So all the product names available within table. Now obviously there is some table related to products. Here it was show all the customer details. It was very specific that I have to go to customers. Now it has said show all the product names available within table. So which table do you think? So I will select. There is product line, there is products. I can go over here, I can see if product line is having related to product name. No. I can go in products and see is products having something related to product name. Yes. You can see there is a product name being given. So I can write select. Now no issue that you have to write in one line. You can write it. No issues of cases as well. So select star. Whenever there is specification given, many a times I preferably first try to do select star from table and then accordingly modify the query. So I'll do from what? What's the table name? The table name which I will gather is products and put up a semicolon that the query ended. Control enter. You can see all the information, all the columns are being shown from which table over here, that's product. What do I want? Show all the product names, which means I want the product name. Now it's written product names. So it's not like you have to write select product names or names from the products table. Whatever is the name of the column in your table, that is what you are going to specify. So first I did this in order to observe everything and then I will modify the query according to the requirement. What it is? Instead of star, I'll put up what? Product name. When I run this, you can see n number of product names are available within the table. So this was the second query which we saw with respect to select. Now the third query which we will see with respect to select, let's say I want to gather multiple columns. Here in the above one I gathered one. So let's say I want to gather multiple columns. Let's take orders and there is order number, order date and shipment status. So find the order number, shipped date as well as the status of shipment or the status of orders which are placed. So I want to see whatever orders are placed, what is the order number, when the order was shipped and what is the status of the order now. So here if you see, I don't want an entire table, but still for the purpose of simplicity, I'll first do select star from what? From orders. I run this. Here you can see order number, order date, required date, ship date, status, comments and customer number. Now according to the query, let's modify it. What is the purpose? What is the ask? That you want order number. Do you have order number? Yes, it is suggesting you. Comma. What do you want over here? That is shipment status or shipment date. So you can see ship date. And what is another thing which you required? Another thing is order status. So there is nothing called as order status, but there is something called as status as a column. So I've selected this. Now status is in blue. No need to worry. Why? Because there are certain functionalities which are associated with MySQL Workbench. So that's why it is showing you blue. But there is not going to be any issue as such with us. So when I run this query, when I execute this query, you can see from the entire table, not all information is being accessed. Only those information where order number, ship date and status is being accessed from my table. So this was a select with multiple part. What if I have a database selected as classic models? But let's say I want to gather data from Sakila. Now Sakila has data related to lots of other things, let's say actors, categories and many more things. So I want to understand, I want to see what all actor details are available into the table. So what actor details are available, that needs to be within the table. That needs to be what? Understood. So if I want to understand that, now what it is? Your actor is in Sakila database. You were working in what? Classic models. One thing is you can do is switch your databases, but multiple times switch, it will be very complicated. It will be very complicated or consuming or let's say confusing for us. So what I can do is I can double click. I can also double click over here. So both could be done. What I can possibly do over here, let me close it. I am in the classic models, which is there. If I do select star from, as I've said earlier, always do select star and then modify the query. So query, here if you can see, it's giving me error. Table classic models dot actor doesn't exist. Why? Because the database is now classic models. Your table or the information which you need to extract is in the Sakila. So, as said that you can change it to Sakila and this would be generating an outcome, or else if I don't want to change the database name, but still I want to observe the query result for the same where a different database is being used. So, how will I do it? Just a second. Is I do select star from, but when a table is written, I'll mention the source. Now source means from where it is coming. So where it is coming, Sakila as a database, and within that database what I want to extract, that is actor. So I'll write dot. So whenever you write dot, it is from that particular place what you are going to extract or what you are going to gather. What I'm going to gather is actor. And you can see the same information is being shown in the outcome. So this is how your select statements would be written. This is how your data would be accessed with the help of simple select statements or simple select executions as such. I hope you understood what was a select statement. Later on, we'll try to understand few more clauses, but I hope the select statement is clear with you all.